Okay.
Now it's getting hotter.
Turn on the lights.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, thank you everyone for coming today, and thank you Tianeng for hosting us here at his company, Venture OpenView.
Yeah.
OpenView. For those that don't know me, I'm Ang. I work at Wellington Management, actually across from the bridge here.
The bigger building.
Big building. On a hedge fund at Wellington. And also with Chang lead this effort of helping the Association of Boston Vietnamese young professionals to connect with other professionals, and today we also have a few Boston College students, which is great. That way we can have a more diversity mix. But I'm great to have three panelists here who thank you for coming. So I'm going to introduce quickly. This is Richard, who's been my friend for a pretty long time now, and then Nate Jackson and Moise. And I'll let them to introduce themselves and tell us about their background, and then a few questions, and then we'll open to the audience.
So, Richard Zong, nice to meet you all. I currently work at Accenture. I graduated from Boston University in 2006 with a degree in economics. So I joined Accenture after graduating from undergraduate school, and I worked in the systems implementation team there, so operations, IT side of things at Accenture for about 4 years. At that point, I went to pursue my MBA with NYU Stern. After school, I rejoined Accenture, but now in the management consulting space in their risk practice for capital markets, and that's where I currently am right now. So my main area of focus are the major banks as well as buy-side firms in the Boston area.
Hey guys, I'm Nate Jackson. I grew up in Boston. I went to a little school in western Pennsylvania called Grove City College and studied mechanical engineering. I worked after that for 3 years in the Pittsburgh area for a division of Bechtel that does nuclear power plants for the Navy. Was engaged in a lot of the stuff that I was doing, but found myself drawn towards business more broadly. And so I applied to the part-time MBA program at Carnegie Mellon. For a year there, I switched into a role at Deloitte while I was still in the part-time program, where I was doing valuation of tangible assets. So it was somewhere between accounting and engineering. And then again, while I was in the part-time program, I found myself drawn ultimately to the field of consulting. And so I applied for internships, not really expecting anything to pan out. I just wanted to have the experience, but had an internship in management consulting and then finished school full-time. And I'll be joining Bain & Company in January. So I've been on the bench for the last 5 or 6 months, which has been good, but I'm also really excited to get back to work here in a few months.
And you're also the founder of a nonprofit.
Yes, so on the side, or just sort of a nights and weekends project, has been a project. I'm broadly interested in international development. So a couple of years ago, a friend from college and I started it's basically like it's like sort of venture capital, philanthropy venture capital in some way, but doing really nuts and bolts basic stuff. All of our projects so far have been in Uganda, with different levels of success and experience, but it's been interesting.
So my name is Moses Numa. I went to Babson College, and at Babson I graduated with a business management degree and also got my master's in accounting. But like Nate here, even though I was really interested in accounting, I had an inclination towards business and getting a more holistic view of things, and I ended up working at Analysis Group, which is a consulting firm, but they provide economic and financial consulting to our clients. So I've been there for about 2 years now. Really happy at the firm, and I'm happy to answer any questions you guys have about it.
So maybe we'll start. First question is, what do you, in consulting, what do you guys actually do, and maybe you could give some sense of what daily work like and what kind of projects you work on.
So I'll caveat this with there's really 2 types of consulting, and Analysis Group is kind of a little bit different. But when you think of traditional consulting, there's really operations versus strategy. And when you think strategy, you're thinking about the firms like Bain and McKinsey and BCG, and then on the operations side, you have the Big Four, and to an extent some of the other players in that field. So I'm in operations, right? So I can't speak to strategy. Within operations consulting, it's very similar to strategy consulting in which you're providing solutions, but you're also delivering on the solutions. So while you may be creating slides and thinking through of different ways to help your clients improve upon various different aspects of the company, you're then also, you may be part of a team that's sitting there and actually delivering upon that. So for instance, on the IT side of things, if you're part of like an Accenture, or what you'll do is, if it's a systems implementation job, you may serve as a business analyst. So you're creating specifications for the IT developers or the engineers, right? Or you may be doing support work, right? So you could be augmenting the staff of your client. So if a client says, I need somebody to help me in my compliance team, then you could very well be brought on and just doing that work based on your skill set. So from an operations consulting perspective, it's longer term engagements. You're doing a little, not as much strategy, but you are doing some, but think of it more as you're now doing the implementation part of whatever you have proposed to the client.
So like I said, I haven't started with Bain yet, but my summer internship was with McKinsey, which is also in the strategy realm of consulting. So I had one 3-month summer project, and it was in the field of healthcare. And I think it was representative in the sense that any case you get with one of these firms oftentimes can run totally different. Your clients will be different, your industry could be different, at least within the strategy firms. And that was one of the big things that attracted me to the field, was because I came into school as an engineer, knew I was interested in business, didn't know where I would fit in there. And for that reason, this sort of work was really interesting to me as an option. But within my one project, the 3 months that I had, it was a combination of ways to stretch your brain on the creative end, and then ways to stretch your brain on the analytical end. And I think one of the things that you'll find is that no matter what you're good at or what you need work on, you'll find yourself stretched in both of those ways in one of these roles. And in terms of the day-to-day, you spend, at least in my experience, I spent a lot of time analyzing survey data. So whatever solutions you're looking to find for your client, oftentimes you have to be generating data that doesn't exist, or you can be looking at population census data to understand where consumers are, who they might be, anything under the sun basically that you can get your hands on. But the day-to-day of it is either probably doing analysis of data and then finding a way to convey that data, to convey that information to your clients in a way that makes sense to them. So it'll range from project to project, but it's going to stretch all parts of you, I think, is the answer.
So like Richard was saying, there's the operational side and the strategy side, and then there's analysis group and economic consulting firm. So the type of work we do is completely different than what these guys are doing. Probably 98% of our clients are corporations who are going through lawsuits. So we'll team up with the lawyers and an expert witness who's going to testify on behalf of the company. And so we work as a team to be able to, and we analyze the situation both either in the we either apply economic theories to understand the situation and help the client make certain arguments. On the financial side, similarly, understand the market conditions or understand the different securities that came into play and help the client make, to the extent that we can, make certain arguments through the litigation. So the day-to-day, the majority of the work we do is with numbers based on the nature of what we're doing and who we're working with. So the lawyers will do all the legal side, and they'll pass on to us all the econ or finance or data analysis, and we perform different types of regressions or analysis, and like I said, everything is with numbers, or the majority of the work we do is with numbers, so it's very heavy on the quant. The reason why I went there is because I wanted to get into consulting, see a lot of different industries, but at the same time I wanted to develop some of the technical skills and I felt like this was a good blend between the two, being able to be exposed to consulting, but developing the technical skills.
So you know, I love hearing that people here are students and they're really interested in trying to break in the industry, especially you, Nate, since joining Bain soon, and you also did some internship. What was the process like, and how did you find the jobs, and what was some of the challenging that you found, and any tips for the students here?
Yeah, so I think I would start off by saying that I went to a little no-name college out of undergrad, and I remember looking at sort of the job description for the first time a few years out of school, or maybe a year out of school, and thinking like, well, shoot, I just can't do that. I can't get there because I didn't do X, Y, or Z. And what I found in graduate school was that while there is sort of like a funnel within school, or even in your undergraduate, there are people who come into the career from any number of directions. My experience was through school, where it was a little bit more organized. There's a club at my school that helps mobilize you to understand what the networking steps are, how to learn more about each firm, how to prepare for case interviews, how to prepare for the behavioral piece of interviews, and then the firms that were actually coming to campus to meet with students, to understand a little bit more about them, and to shed a little bit more light on their applications when they come in. And so my experience was within the realm of graduate school. But I would just say don't assume that if a firm isn't directly at your school that it's not possible. A lot of things can happen just from interacting with somebody from a firm and letting them know you're submitting an application. But in terms of the actual interviews, there are really two main components. It's the case interview and then the fit component. In my experience, the first rounds tend to be more about, can this person do what we need them to do on the ground, and there are these case interviews which you may or may not have heard of. Have you guys heard of case interviews? Do you know how consulting firms?
Yeah.
Yeah, so they're simulated problems based on experiences that the interviewer has had.
Can you give an example question, case?
Yeah, so it could be a blood bank is losing profitability, and the president or the CEO is worried. What would you do to look into the problem, and how would you address it? How would you prioritize solutions? It could be a question about how to grow. It could be a question about whether or not you would be willing to buy a bus company. It could be anything under the sun, really, which is a reflection of what you could be doing in consulting. And so really what it's testing is the width or the breadth and depth of your skills, so your sort of inherent business intuition and business knowledge, but then also your ability to dive into the details in some sort of analytical fashion as well. There's a lot to be said about all of that, but I would just say there are a lot of good resources out there if you are interested in preparing for consulting interviews.
Do you guys have any other thoughts how you found your job and how you...
Sure. So analysis group again is very different. So we don't do the case interviews, but I just want to emphasize Nate's point that it doesn't matter where you're coming from. The way I got my job was through networking. I met someone at the company. Actually, I knew this person at the company. Started talking to him about the opportunity analysis group. Passed my resume along. Once you're in the interview, you're at the same playing field as everyone else. It doesn't matter your experience or what school they went to, what school you went to. It doesn't really matter. As long as you can demonstrate that you are capable of doing the job, you have good chances. But to speak to analysis groups' recruiting process, they do two interviews. The first interview is mainly fit. They'll ask you a few technical questions, but trying to understand whether your experiences are related to what we do. They don't expect you to know how to run very complex regressions or how to program, but they want to see that you have an interest in this kind of work, so that once we expose you to it, that you'll be very interested in it and want to learn it. So if you move on to the second round, that's your final round interviews, and I think it was 4 or 5 interviews.
5.
So 5 interviews with 5 30-minute interviews with different people, ranging from an analyst to manager or VP, and it's going to be very similar to the first round, where the person wants to understand whether or not they would feel comfortable working with you. So getting to the fit part of things, and at the same time they dive a little deeper into your into your technical skills. So tell me about a time that you analyze data, or tell me about some research that you've done. In my case, I talk a lot about my thesis. My thesis was an econ project where I was analyzing the situation at both the quantitative and qualitative side. So 90% of the questions were about that thesis, and after the questions were, how did you look at this data? Why did you pick these variables? Did you think about this? Did you think about that? So if that's a career that you guys are thinking about, it's one of the things you need to start thinking, okay, am I doing the right things to be able to demonstrate that this is what I'm interested in doing? And if so, when you're preparing for an interview, start thinking about the potential questions that you're going to get about those analysis and those research projects that you've done.
Okay. Well, open questions that way. I don't dominate.
Yeah, I guess going to Nate, you interned at McKinsey. What was your choice to go to, go to Bain?
So I'll first say that I had a tremendous experience at McKinsey. I was in the Pittsburgh office, and I think going into the summer, I would have still said, so I'd recruited at both Bain and McKinsey, and didn't end up getting the internship with Bain. Went to McKinsey, was thrilled to be going there, but I maybe had this idea that I wouldn't fit as well in McKinsey culture, and that maybe, I don't know if you guys know the differences between the firms, but in my head I would have thought, these guys probably aren't as much fun or are a little bit more stuffy. Didn't find that to be the case at all.
McKinsey?
That was my, whatever, the 2 or 3 people I'd interacted with. I had this assumption, but I found the people to be phenomenal. I felt like everyone around me was smarter than me, which is a good thing. And so I had a really great experience. The big thing, or one of the big things for me was location issue, which was purely personal. Found that I really needed to move back home to Boston to be closer to family. My offer with McKinsey was in Pittsburgh, and couldn't get that to line up. But another thing about Bain that I was excited about was the culture at Bain is something that I expect to be really robust, and something that it's a place where I think you really know the people in your office better because of the way they staff projects. So at McKinsey, the way that we staff projects, my client was in Detroit, my manager was from Washington, D.C., my other associate was from Sao Paulo, Brazil. So when we had to work together, we just went to Detroit. Even if we didn't have a client meeting, we would just go to Detroit so we could see each other in face-to-face, because that matters a lot. But at Bain, for the most part, they try to staff everything with people from each office. So that means that if I don't have a meeting at the client site until Wednesday, I can be working from my office Monday and Tuesday. That makes, hopefully, work-life balance a little bit better. And then also I think you do build deeper relationships with your coworkers, because you work around and with the same people day in, day out. And I think that's reflected to some extent in the culture.
Bain ranks #1 for many years now as the best place to work in something.
Yeah, I think they're a bunch of positive people, so hopefully it's not just that they're all super excited, but I think that affected me to some extent as well.
So Nate, so some of us are currently in business school, and others are considering business school in the future as well. So I'm just wondering, what do you think are some of the most helpful things that business school have prepared you for a career in management consulting at Bain or McKinsey, and other consulting firms? Because given that people are complaining more and more about the quality of an MBA program and whether you're receiving the proper return on investment for your investment, so you can speak to that.
Yeah, so that's a broad question. So the return on investment question is one thing, but in terms of what I gained from business school, I think outside of the recruiting realm, I can't point to individual experiences in business school. I imagine you guys might, or I don't remember, did you do business school?
I have not.
Richard did.
Yeah.
I can't point to distinctive classes that really changed the way I thought, except 1 or 2. But when I think about the way that I think about the world now, as opposed to 3 years ago before I started the program, it's radically different. And that comes from conversations with classmates. It comes from from lectures in class, from projects you're doing, and it comes from even preparing for consulting cases.